I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
There's something, this magical quality of the surfing culture.
Absolutely.
And that resonates beyond California. So why do you think that is? Why isn't it just that Surfing USA or California Girls? Why wasn't it only popular in California?
We just got back from Europe. 50 years ago, on June, 19th, we played in what was called Czechoslovakia. They were invaded the year before by the Soviet troops. Russian, East German, Polish, a couple others. When we flew in from London, on one side of the runway was the MiG jets, and the other side was the Russian tanks. And I looked out the windows and I said, holy shit, this is the most intimidating landing I've ever been on. And we were welcomed like heroes there because we represented America, rock and roll, freedom, therefore. And then we got back there 50 years later, and it's now the Czech Republic, and there's freedom. And there's a documentary called Free to Rock. And the premise of it is rock music helped bring freedom to that part of the world. And we're in it. And it was amazing to go back to this identical place 50 years later to a place that's free and no Soviet domination anymore.
And James Altucher!
Always the performer, Mike.
What's that?
Always the performer.
Well, no, I mean, look at this. This is great. This is fantastic. Excuse me, but I'm a little nervous. I don't think I've ever been podcasted before. Just be gentle,
Podcast
okay?
is the best format possible. You're in good hands. We're going to take care of you here.
Okay. All right,
So-
what are we promoting here? Never mind.
Poland Spring Water for the Poland Spring Beach Boys tour. You still have the name Beach Boys when you tour, correct?
That's true.
So when you
In Spain, it's Chicos de la Playa.
there you go. So when you leave here and tour, you tour as the Beach Boys?
Yeah.
Okay, and just to mention, you have an album. You're 70 years. Your latest album just came out like last Thursday. 12 Sides of Summer.
Where's the CD?
We have a bunch of them.
Where's the CD? I want to show it on the podcast.
We'll show it.
It's beautiful art.
Yeah.
My son Brian did the photo. He's a National Geographic kind of. He goes out and takes photos. He got the Aurora Borealis in an island off of Norway in February. I said, haven't you ever heard of Polynesia? I mean, it's 90 degrees year-round. I mean, but he went to freezing-ass cold island off of Norway.
That's where he took that?
And this is his photo that he took.
I assumed that was in
Brian
California.
Love. And this 12 sides of summer, or as they say in Espanol, 12 lados de verano. You know what I'm saying? Okay, we're trying to be multicultural here if you didn't get. Look at this guy's got my shirt on. Good vibration. Stand up, turn around. Show James. You see that? See, the girl on that is my son took the photos. My girl Amba, my daughter Amba, she modeled for that.
Oh, really? Did you know to get that for this?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
That's a good vibration shirt. And my daughter Amba said, "Dad, I wish I was a hippie in the '60s." I said, "If you'd have been around in the '60s, you'd be in your '60s. So be happy where you are."
Well, we're gonna get to that. I'm curious first about the very beginnings. Do you mind if I ask you about the very beginning? So you and your cousins were hanging out all through your childhood, harmonizing on Sunday nights with each other while your aunt played the piano, or Brian played the piano, or whoever.
Yeah.
And then in 1961, you use a home recording studio. You make Surfin'.
Yeah.
And your very first song, you're like 19 years old. You were the oldest of them. You're 19 years old. You have a song that charts in the top 100 on Billboard as your very first song. I think that's incredible. I'm jealous. Like everyone, not that I'm.
Well,
You look at all the rejection in every career, and you guys are just like, let's just make a song that's going to be in the top 100 in the world.
Well, that's true. We were very fortunate. But I'll tell you, to make it a little more interesting, the guy that signed us to his record company, it was called Candix Records. He paid us a total of $900, and he declared bankruptcy. He was running his company out of the back of his car. Surfin', the song Surfin', which we re-recorded on this one, 12 Sides of Summer. Surfin' it was like a big record in LA. It was like, and Vegas and Minneapolis. But then that was it. I mean, on the basis of that, it did chart, though. But he declared bankruptcy, didn't pay us, but that liberated us to go to Capital EMI, which EMI is around the world, right? The Capital was their division in the United States. They also had a group from England called the Beatles.
Small group. We're gonna get to them. That's 2 years away still.
So that was Surf and Safari. That I was the only person who signed that contract who was 21. Everybody else was younger and had to have court approval. So yeah, so we did pretty well. 62 was Surf and Safari. 63 Surfin' USA. There's some other songs along the way.
And so Surfin' USA was your first top 10 hit
It
number
was
3 in Billboard?
Is it only 3?
Only 3, yes.
I demand a recount.
But right out the gate though, you guys were so successful. You had a unique sound.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I think, maybe is you're all related, right? You, Brian
helps.
Wilson, Dennis, Carl.
There was
so when
this-
you were
yeah.
harmonizing, do you think it was almost genetically that you guys harmonized so well together, plus the practice put in?
Okay, the deal is, my mom came from Kansas when she was about 5 years old on a train. They were so broke that they camped on a beach in Southern California when they first got there because they didn't have any money to buy a house or let alone rent a house. And my grandfather, Wilson, was a plumber. He would go around and work in different oil fields, different places. So my grandmother had 9 children, 8 lived to maturity. One of them being my mother, Emily Glee Wilson, and my uncle, Murray Gage Wilson. Murray Gage was the father of Brian Dennis and Carl Wilson. So we grew up, the thing that held them together was music. My mom sang in light opera in high school. On the radio, it was a big deal. My uncle sang a quartet. So we grew up in an atmosphere of music. And even though they were broke, they were so, that side of the family was really not doing well, but they had music and they loved music. And so I grew up in this atmosphere of loving music and loving harmonies in particular, getting together and harmonizing together. It had nothing to do with money, had nothing to do with getting famous, zero. But it was, we'd go to Wednesday night youth night at Angeles Mesa Presbyterian Church, and Brian and I and my sister would sing Everly Brothers on the way back, or we'd sing doo-wop and all that kind of thing. So it was really just the love of harmony.
And doing that, when did you first get indication that, so like Brian Wilson, your cousin, you guys are almost like the Lennon McCartney of American music. When did you first get the indication that, oh my gosh, Brian is really good at putting these harmonies together in these kind of fugue state?
There was nobody better than sitting down at the piano and, okay, he developed a fixation, and I have a fascination with a group called the Four Freshmen. They did this remarkable harmony. If nobody's ever checked out the Four Freshmen, you'll blow your mind on how good of singers they are and what the chord progressions were. And they called it modern harmony back then. It was kind of a jazzy kind of a thing. I call it carbon-dated harmony now.
But yes, because I listened to the Four Freshmen and some of the songs that you descended, that you guys did that descended from them. You guys have more. They harmonized very well, but there wasn't that extra oomph, that power.
No, the oomph came from rock and roll. The oomph came from Chuck Berry and, the doo-wop thing too, and R&B. So we were influenced by R&B, doo-wop, Chuck Berry. The Everly Brothers are a big deal for us. We loved all that rock and roll music, so we blended all the influence of the Chuck Berry licks. He was a big influence on me writing fun, 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 let's say. Well, she got her daddy's car and she cruised through the hamburger stand now. Seems she forgot all about the library like she told her old man now. Or when some...
Are you talking about my daughter?
What? Was that?
You were talking about my daughter for a second.
Oh, no, the thing is, the way he syncopated and wrote his lyrics and made these little stories, that was huge. So it's called alliteration in English, like the English class, alliteration.
Well, even before Fun, 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 in Surfin' USA, you basically take a Chuck Berry song and add you and Brian add your style of harmonizing, because Chuck Berry was just his single voice. You've got the four voices, you're double recording over them to strengthen them, and then you writing the kind of aspirational California lyrics totally added to the Chuck Berry song. That was a great formula for creating that first top 10 hit.
It was. You see, it was our environment informed by the musical influences we had, and then we sound the way we sound. My cousin Brian had an amazing falsetto, amazing. I mean, at the end of Fun, 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 it's like you're lucky if you don't get a speeding ticket when that takes off. I mean, it's mind-blowing. It blew our minds every time we sang. But songs like In My Room and Surfer Girl and Don't Worry Baby, I mean that high part, I would sing the bass on those. Now don't you worry, baby. Or, just the warmth of the sun, written in November of 1963. We were awakened to the news that President Kennedy had been taken to the hospital. Yeah. And we recorded that a month or so later. On January 1st, we recorded it, and it was like, wow. I mean, the whole country was, in shock, or at least, we were. And so that song, although we did not change the lyrics to conform to that event, it still has the emotion, and you can hear it in the grooves of the recording.
So you guys officially kind of started in late '61 with Surfin'. Mm-hmm. Again, first top 10 hit was about a year and a few months later with Surfin' USA. When did you say to yourself, you know what? I think this is it. I think I'm going to be the biggest rock star in history.
No. I'm
going to have a shot at
it. Other people are the biggest rock star in history. We're a rock group that did some historical songs. But, the boss is the big rock star. Come on, let's face it. Bruce, right? Come on.
How many albums? I don't know how many albums he sold, but it's not as many as the Beach Boys.
It's not about that. It's just, I didn't ever look at ourselves as rock stars. I looked at us as the guys next door who sang their asses off. Yeah, that's what it is.
But it's interesting though you bring him up because the lyrics of both and the feeling of both is very much about the geography, the demographic where you come from,
you're right.
and aspirational. Like there's something, this magical quality of the surfing culture, and for Bruce Springsteen, there's this magical quality of like blue collar New Jersey.
Absolutely.
And that resonates beyond California, beyond New Jersey, obviously.
Sure.
So why do you think that is? Why isn't it just that Surfing USA was only popular in or California Girls? Why wasn't it only popular in California?
We just got back from Europe. 50 years ago, on June, 19th, we played in what was called Czechoslovakia. They were invaded the year before by the Soviet troops, Russian, East German, Polish, a couple others. When we flew in from London, on one side of the runway was the MiG jets, and the other side was the Russian tanks. And I looked out the windows, were landing, and I said, "Holy shit! This is the most intimidating landing I've ever been on." I mean, and we were welcomed like heroes there because we represented America, rock and roll, freedom. Therefore, and then we got back there 50 years later. This very same identical hall, which was built in 1920 or something, doesn't even have an elevator. You have to carry all your stuff up and down. Anyway, we came back, and it's now the Czech Republic, and there's freedom. And there's a documentary called Free to Rock, and it has the premise of it is rock music helped to bring freedom to that part of the world, and we're in it. And it was amazing to go back to the identical place 50 years later to a place that's free and not no Soviet domination anymore.
Do you think California always represented kind of the frontier,
Yeah.
mythical and real
Yeah.
of the U.S. growth? It represented more than just the state, and then the surfing culture on top of that you could just sort of lie around and then go surfing, and it's beautiful, athletic. Everybody's good looking and pretty, and you guys were writing about it. You were kind of sharing a culture.
Yeah.
Around the world. It represented even more than freedom. It was like you could live this unbelievable lifestyle now.
Aspirational.
For the first time.
You said aspirational. Yeah. Right. It was true. In advertising.
And none of you guys even surfed.
No, that's not true. I can honestly say I'm a shitty surfer. But I sing about it really well.
Fair enough.
The guys who are the surfers, they're the greatest athletes. I defy anybody in the NBA or the NFL to surf like those guys do. Those guys the guys that are great are unbelievable. We have some footage of some of the biggest big wave surfer in the world. Every night he did a video to Surfing USA. Okay, so it's a beautiful thing.
Well, what's interesting in Surfing USA and also California Girls, you wrote the lyrics to all these songs, is you're very diplomatic. You're not just talking about surfing in California or girls in California.
No.
You kind of go around the country in the
We
lyrics.
do, and around the world. We said in Surfing USA, Waimea Bay is Hawaii, but we talk about surfing in Australia too. So yeah.
And you were writing the lyrics. What made you think, I better talk about East Coast girls as well before I get into the California girls?
We had been touring for a few years. It was 1965, and my cousin Brian's in the studio with what they called the Wrecking Crew. And the reason they were called the Wrecking Crew is because the traditional musicians who played in symphonies and stuff like that and big bands, they thought they were going to wreck the business. But the Wrecking Crew was some of the greatest artists. I mean, Glenn Campbell was one of them. He was an amazing guitarist. He never even had a lesson. He just learned it. And so my cousin Brian was in the Studio 3 at Western Recorders on Sunset Boulevard with the Wrecking Crew doing the track, the instrumentation to California Girls. I took my legal line paper out in the hallway and said, "Well, East Coast girls are hip. I really dig the styles they wear. And the Southern girls, with the way they talk, they knock me out when I'm down there. the Midwest farmer's daughters really make you feel all right. And the Northern girls, with the way they kiss, keep their boyfriends warm at night. I thought it was poetry that related, you know?
But, and very democratic of you.
I admit being inspired by the girls all around the world and around the country. I'm guilty as charged.
And a good job, I will say, in a nice way, pandering to make sure, hey, don't leave anyone out.
Did he say pandering?
And
it doesn't have something to do with what's going on in the corner down there or something like that.
And it worked out. Like everybody gets a piece of the song.
I wish we could change the word pandering to something else.
You were very gracious to everyone.
That's a lot better.
So again, like, at what point was it after Surfing USA?
Okay,
It's
no.
top 10?
To get to the answer to your question, we're in Minneapolis. Okay, where Surfing was #1 and Surfing Safari was a big hit. Okay, at that time of our career, we would have a station wagon and a U-Haul, and we would carry set up and break down our own equipment. I played the saxophone. We played Midnight Sun and different songs, you know, or Let's Go Trip. And you don't have all your own songs when you first start out. That's why the Beatles did rock and roll music, the Stones did, Route 66 and whatever. So we did our thing. There was 4 sets. They sold out. They were breaking the windows to get in. After a second set, we had 2 more to go. We took a break. Went out and saw the lights down the road for like a mile. You couldn't see the end of the lights. They were it was already sold out. They wouldn't let any more people in. And I said to my cousin, I said, this must be what it was like when Elvis started out. You know, because I had no frame of reference. I mean, it was on Lake Minnetonka, which is this beautiful place in Minnesota.
And was this before Surfing USA came out?
Yeah.
So it's really early on. And then what did your cousin say back to you?
What's that?
What did your cousin say
No,
back?
I can't remember. I can't remember that one.
But then
I remember what I felt like and what I saw, you know.
And then I imagine a few months later, the Beatles hit the U.S. The British invasion starts. I almost was going to say the Bee Gees, but I was going to leave that joke for later. So
that's Australia.
Yeah, there you go. So
land of convicts.
When the Beatles hit, they were, to some extent, you guys were rivaling each other even on the U.S. charts. They were the only ones above you for many songs. And what was the initial reaction? You're already like the best American band, the best-selling American band in the U.S. The Beatles come in with something new somehow. What do you think it was that, propelled them to be even, people were fascinated. There was, people would mob the airports when they would land.
Oh, yeah. We got mobbed in England when we landed. Actually, in 1966, Good Vibrations went to #1 in Great Britain.
Before here, even?
No, it was here. It was #1, too. But it was #1 there, and we were voted the #1 group in Great Britain, #2 being the Beatles, #4 the Stones.
Oh, so that must have felt good.
So I'm just saying facts, you know.
Right. So in 1963.
This is not a political poll. This is facts.
So in 1963, though, the Beatles are starting to rise up here. You and Brian Wilson was also saying maybe the California sound we should experiment a little bit more. You were trying
we did,
to,
in fact,
right, with Pet Sounds, with the album Pet Sounds, starting with that, and then Good Vibrations.
Right.
But what? Was it in terms of rivalry with the Beatles that propelled you to this thinking?
What it was is it was a mutual admiration thing going on, because they would come out with Revolver, and we would come out with something. We came out with Pet Sounds. They came out with Sgt. Pepper's. In fact, the Rolling Stone magazine did a coffee table book several years ago with the 500 top rock albums. I think that's a lot to absorb. But #1 was Sgt. Pepper, and #2 out of 500 was Pet Sounds. And I said, I demanded a recount, but what are you going to do?
And so the interesting thing with Pet Sounds is when it first came out in the U.S., Capitol, your label, released a week beforehand a Best of the Beach Boys compilation.
Correct.
Forcing down, Pet Sounds didn't chart as well. Brian Wilson was disappointed.
Somebody said that I said, don't fuck with the formula. And that's such a lie because I named Pet Sounds. See, at the end of the record, if you remember, there's a dog barking at a train going by. I said, well, why don't we call it Pet Sounds? Which is a double entendre, as they say in France, right? It's a double meaning, right? And then I went with Brian to present it to Capitol Records. The A&R guy was one of the nicest guys you've ever met in the business. His name is Carl Engelman. He ended up managing the group from Utah. What's that group that...
The Mormons? What?
No, Osmonds. They were so famous, it's ridiculous. Did so many great records. Anyway, they didn't know what to do with Pet Sounds. He said, he listens to the album and says, gee, that's great, guys, but couldn't you do something more like California Girls or I Get Around? Or, you know, they were used to the formulaic hits. And nothing wrong with them. We came back with Good Vibrations and went to #1. But Pet Sounds, they didn't know how to treat it.
So, and Good Vibrations was initially going to be put on Pet Sounds, right? And somehow it was like off the album?
I'm not sure. Brian took his time coming up with the tracks. He'd try different studios for different sounds, different sections and stuff.
On Good Vibrations?
Yeah, on Good Vibrations.
And that's interesting because, so Good Vibrations, I think it took 22 studio sessions to
Something
record.
like that,
It wasn't
yeah.
just like everybody going in the studio and singing.
Yeah, and he'd
It's like
hire all
90
these
hours of-
musicians, and then he wasn't satisfied, so he went to another 5 studios. It
And,
was
like,
crazy.
I think when we think about Good Vibrations now, we immediately associate it with the Beach Boys and many of your other songs, but it's such a different song when you actually take it apart. There's so many different odd parts to it
yeah.
that weren't in music then and influenced the Beatles, the Stones, everybody afterwards.
It was the psychedelic era, or the beginnings of it, this Flower Power, Summer of Love, and all that kind of stuff. It was our psychedelic anthem. And I envision a hippie chick with colorful clothes and the bandana and all, and just I love the colorful clothes she wears and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. I hear the sound of her gentle voice and the wind that lifts her perfume to her. I was dying to say incense, but I thought Omaha wouldn't go for it. Anyway, it was so the bass is going. So I came up. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. Excitations is not in the Webster's dictionary, but it rhymes with vibrations. You know what I'm saying?
I think in hindsight it worked.
What?
In hindsight, it worked.
It worked pretty darn well.
And you know that hook that you just sang, that kind of held together. Like each section of that song is completely different from the other sections. There's
That's
different
right.
instruments, different chords.
I
It's
know.
like,
Well, I came up with those words and that hook, and then I dictated the lyrics. I'm on the way to the studio. I didn't know if Brian was ever going to figure out when he was finished with doing Good Vibrations, the track. So finally, this is the session where we're going to do the vocals. I dictated it to my then wife, Suzanne, who's the mother of Haley and Christian, who's singing with us these days. And I said, take this down. I'm driving. I'm doing, I love the colorful clothes she wears. And the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. XKE, you know what I'm saying? So I wrote the words on the way to the studio. I present them to Brian, he likes them. Give them to Carl, he sings the lyric. And I do the I'm picking up that the chorus, and then everybody else is jumping in with the harmonies. Brian doing the high part.
and Carl is the I that starts off the song.
I love the colorful clothes she wears. Yeah, he's an amazing singer. Yeah, he did good. He did God Only Knows on the Pet Sounds album, and he sang the lead of the verses of Good Vibrations. And we all did the chorus, and I came up with the hook of the chorus.
And so at this point, you're doing a lot of the touring, you and the other band members.
That's right.
And Brian, not so much. He was producing.
He left in '64. Glenn Campbell filled in for several months before Bruce Johnston joined us. in '65. In fact, the first song Bruce sang with us was California Girls. Yeah.
And you guys have been touring ever since.
We came back from Japan, and Brian had recorded all the tracks for the Pet Sounds album. So I wrote a couple of words for a couple of the songs, and a guy named Tony Asher did a fantastic job doing God Only Knows and several other songs on the album.
And so, was this the beginning, would you say, of kind of or was there ever any musical split between you and Brian? I mean, you were on the road a lot.
It was a lifestyle
studio.
No, it was a lifestyle split. Because whereas I gravitated towards meditation and transcendental meditation, which I learned from Maharishi in December of '67, some other lifestyle choices were taken by my cousin Dennis and Brian as well. Carl had some problems for a while, but he got out of it. So, some of those things are, Dennis died at 39. That's no good. And Carl died 21 years ago from lung cancer, but then he started smoking when he was 12, and the statistics are not good. It's just sad that these are your cousins, your first cousins, and you're part of the family. I did a spoken book, Good Vibrations in My Life as a Beach Boy, they asked me, well, do you want us to get an actor to read it? I said, no, it's my... So I took 4 days at my studio at home and recorded it. And when I was talking about, Carl's last night with us on tour, I can remember it clearly. I got choked up. Yeah. Same thing goes for losing your sister to cancer or your mom. Yeah, these are things, we're all affected as human beings by losses in families and stuff, or, terrible things that happen from alcohol or drugs and stuff like that.
And yet, amidst all this, while these different lifestyle splits were happening, you essentially held the band together as this touring entity all through the 70s, 80s, and beyond.
I've always loved the live part of it more than the studio. To me, the studio is a wonderful thing. It's necessary to gain as perfect a recording as possible. It's impossible in a live sitting to make it perfect, but that's part of the beauty of it. It's just natural. But the effect that our music has on people all over the world, in places where English is not their first language. For instance, Japan will start a song, like if you start California Girls, dun, 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 they go, ah, like bonsai or something, In Germany, they're stomping along to help me, Rhonda, help. It's Teutonic. It's really amazing all over the world.
And help me, Rhonda. That was your second #1 song to hit the top of the charts. I Get Around being the first.
That's right.
So, and then Good Vibrations, the third. And then you have this record of the longest period between two #1 songs.
22 years.
You wrote Kokomo.
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go?
Okay.
Is that cool or what?
I'm curious, how many people know that Kokomo doesn't actually exist?
Hey, now, easy. What are you here to pop bubbles or something?
It's a perfect word. It's the perfect word for it.
No, what it is John Phillips and the Mamas and Papas, who got the Grammy the year Good Vibrations up for a Grammy, I think they won. And I said, if you can't beat them, join them. So we wrote that song. He came up with the verse melody. It went, off the Florida Keys, there's a place we used to go. Us for the Keys, there's a place called Kokomo. That's where we used to go to get away from it all. I said, hold on. That sounds like some guy like lamenting his misspent youth or something. I said, the only thing, change one thing in that line. That's where You wanna go to get away from it all. And then Aruba, Jamaica. I came up with Aruba, Jamaica. Ooh, I wanna take it. And Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. So you could be the old codger saying, let's get in the RV and go to Florida. Or you could be the little kid in the kitchen thinking his mama's pretty.
And
It appeals to all ages.
I mean, did you, while you were sort of working on this song, did you think, okay, this is it. This is gonna be our first #1 song since
No,
Good Vibration?
had no idea. But we were approached by the director of Cocktail, the movie. And when he heard the demo, he said, this is the best song you had since Good Vibrations. I had no frame of reference. They were just on assignment.
And did that, when that song came out, did that create a resurgence in all the old albums? Like, did they suddenly start?
Whenever you have a #1 record, it resurges things, yes.
So how does it work? Like early on in the '60s, I guess it was your uncle sold the catalog.
He
right?
sure did.
And so what does that exactly mean? Like, what don't you get if you don't own the catalog of your music?
It means you get screwed royally. That's what our uncle did to his sons and his nephew. That's me.
And why do you think? So he sold it to some random.
I think things were going a little weird. I mean, people in the band, meaning his sons, were doing things and freaking out a little bit and doing. He didn't believe that we would last very long, so he sold it for a pittance, really.
And what does that mean though? Like when it's played on the radio,
Publishing. The publisher collects the money, and then they're supposed to give whatever the artist portion is. A lot of times it's half. So on an album, which used to sell albums, that would be maybe 5 or 6 cents would come to the publisher, and then they'd split it with the writer. Now, if you sell many millions of albums, you can do pretty well. And also there's a thing called BMI, Broadcast Music, or ASCAP, which are performance societies. So if something's played on the radio, you get some money from that too.
so like right. So if you don't own the catalog though, do you participate in that at all?
Pardon?
If you don't own the catalog, like after he sold the catalog of your music, would you participate in any of those?
You still get your writers, but you don't get the publishing money. And the publishing money is worth a couple $100 million.
So, but all, particularly, there was a period in the '90s where you fought to get your rights you credited correctly as a writer on about 35 different songs, including, I think including Good Vibrations, or which ones were part
Good
of?
Vibrations I was getting credit for, and Fun as well, and a few others. Do It Again, for instance, which went to #1, and Kokomo was #1 in Australia for 8 weeks. That was pretty amazing. Anyway, so no, it was like California Girls, I Get Around, Help Me Rhonda, Surfing USA. I was not given any credit. I wrote all the words to most of those songs.
And you would, during this period in the '60s, you would confront Brian and say, hey, I noticed we released this. I wrote the lyrics.
Right.
And he would say, okay, I'll talk to Uncle Murray. And
He would say, my dad screwed up. But see, Brian went through his own changes there. Just before the Sea of Tunes, it was called, was sold. He was having issues, LSD-based issues. And so he was in no kind of shape to protect himself, let alone me.
But then were you able to basically say, to Murray or even to Brian, even then, hey, let's make this change right now. You can't keep postponing it.
Brian called me before any lawsuit happened. Brian called me to say, I'd like to, rectify this. But he was unable to because he was in what they call a conservatorship, because he was not allowed to do anything of, having to do with anything money-wise. And so the attorney that represented him at that time felt that because the statute of limitations, meaning the length of time that had been since I wrote those songs, they came out, I had no standing. Forget the morality or the ethics of it all. It's just they were playing the legal game, but I had an attorney who was able to pierce that, and because of fraud. and fraud tolls the statute of limitations. So it's a little technical, but the point is, I did get credit for those 35 songs.
But how did you prove that? You know, like you.
Brian would say, "Oh yeah, Mike wrote that."
Okay.
In court.
So that's a good way to prove it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he wrote that. And then his attorneys would freak out and they'd take him out of. They'd take him out of it, and they say, "You're going to go bankrupt if you know." Yeah.
So this was in the early '90s that you guys settled this.
Yeah.
In the '70s and '80s, in that 22-year period before number one songs, you were doing a lot of touring. But was that the main way you would basically, essentially build wealth, like touring around and?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I like personal appearances. But we've done a ton of them. We've probably done over 6,000 shows. Yeah. All over the place, big and small. I mean, Washington, D.C. on July 4th, in front of over 500,000 of our closest friends. One year we did Philadelphia in the afternoon and D.C. in the evening. And the Philadelphia Inquirer said there were 900,000 people in the street. But it wasn't just us. We had a whole, like Joan Jett and the OJs, and we'd have something for everyone. And so it was great. Some country, some whatever. And but the Beach Boys were the headliners for the July 4th concerts back then.
And I feel like the numbers are not, I mean, the number of people listening to music is just as high as ever or higher, but I feel like the numbers of fans who show up for concerts are no longer there. Like the music industry obviously has turned upside down in many ways with streaming and digital and all that. What do you think, like if a musician is coming up right now, how should they think about their careers? What should they focus on?
First of all, find good management, hopefully. Cross your fingers. But also the potential exists to write something and be known worldwide, almost immediately. In the past, you relied upon the record companies to put the money in to promote and work the radio stations and all that. That's no longer necessarily so. I mean, I was on the radio this morning at iHeartRadio, must have talked to a dozen stations, some of which, sublet their stuff out to many more stations. So I still do that. Radio can still play a very important role in your musical career and promotion of your product, your albums, like 12 Sides of Summer. I'd like you to hold that, please.
Yes.
It's your podcast.
12 Sides of Summer, everybody, came out just a few days ago. And at 78 years old, and you were, how many, you said hit 106 cities in Europe, you just got back?
Something like that.
What do you do every day to kind of, if I did even visiting the Eiffel Tower, I'm dead for the week.
Well, that's if you slip and trip. But no, I meditate every day. Have done transcendental meditation since Maharishi taught us in December of 1967. We were in Paris doing a UNICEF show, and that was an incredible show. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, Marlon Brando and his Tish and Bride and dancers, and Victor Borge, the Danish pianist, the Russian Red Army Choir, the Turkish ballet who'd never been on TV. It was an amazing show for UNICEF, and that was just amazing. But we met Maharishi in rehearsals, and so the curtain opens. There's Maharishi in the middle of the first row, with George Harrison on one side and John Lennon on the other side. I said, that's a hell of a first row right there. Whoa. So, but we left and went to England. And then I get a call from my cousin Dennis, who was still back in Paris. He says, you got to come back to Paris. I said, well, why is that? He says, Maharishi is going to teach us to meditate. I said, are you sure? He says, I think so. So he called back. He said, yeah, it's on tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, he's going to give us a lecture. And so we went back to the airport in London, or we'd just been there the day before, and flew into Paris. It's not that far, it's an hour. And it was a Sunday, and you're supposed to bring fruit, flowers, and a clean white cloth for the initiation ceremony. It's a traditional ceremony. So we got fruit and flowers from the flower sellers and clean white napkins from room service. And sure enough, he gave us a lecture and then told us to go and rest and brought us back and initiated us, taught us TM. It was the most relaxing thing I'd ever experienced. And I figured it's so simple that everyone could do it. And if everyone did it, it'd be an entirely different world.
And you've been doing this twice a day
Yeah.
ever since.
I even went to a teacher training course and went to a 6-month-long meditation course because he came out with an advanced program called the TM City program. So, yeah, I benefited greatly from it. I wouldn't be able to sit here and do this today and have done all this stuff this morning and the Balloon Festival yesterday afternoon in Reddington, New Jersey. It's been really a big help for me.
So in 2012, you had this amazing reunion concert. Brian Wilson was there. Everybody who was still around from the original set of originals.
Whoever was around, yeah. Al Jardine, David Marks, myself, and Bruce, yeah.
And then afterwards, you continued touring. Do you think Brian Wilson would have liked to have continued touring with you guys?
I think he would have liked to continue touring with me, but it's, his whole situation is so tough, but health-wise and, he's not doing that great lately. And he had to cancel some touring and stuff.
So, like, if Brian Wilson were to call you up today and say, Mike, let's get the band back together, let's write some songs.
If he was able to, I would say, okay, well, then we're going to this health retreat and we're going to write and be healthy, Brian. That's what we do. I wouldn't do it just because the agents could make money on it or something. That's not where I'm coming from. My criterion would be his health and well-being.
And do you think if he hadn't started, there's always an interesting relationship between mental health and creativity and artistry. Yeah. Do you think that was somehow part of his ability to hear all these different harmonies and then put them down on paper and then create them in the studio? Like, do you think if he had managed to hold on to mental health in the 70s, 80s, you think you guys would have been able to make newer, better songs?
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think though there's a relationship between his issues and the way he put together some of these songs?
Some people can drink a cocktail or a beer or a wine or anything and be fine. Some people can drink 2 or 3 or 5 of them, and maybe the worst you'd have is you feel a little headachy in the morning or something. But some people do the same amount of drinking and it destroys their life and their families. And so it's a biochemical thing. Some people have taken LSD and they're just fine to tell about it. But some people have taken it and it pushed them over the edge psychologically. So, you can't tell what the adverse effects are going to be. And it's not worth finding out, I don't think. So I think that people are creative in spite of some of those things rather than because of.
Now, with it's interesting. You guys created so many top 10 hits in the 60s. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, you had the #1 hit in the 80s. Mm-hmm. What do you think kept you persistent artistically in the 70s and 80s? Not that you weren't creating, because you were, but people would probably always shout out, "Oh, sing Good Vibrations, sing California."
I don't mind that. I love those songs. I have no problem at all doing our first song, Surfin' Safari, Surfin' USA, I Get Around, Fun, 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 Help Me Run to California Girls. What's the problem? Right. I mean, some people, I've heard of people that don't want to do all their hits. They want to just do their new album. I said, okay, whatever, that's what you want to do, fine. But I love those songs. But, I don't feel trapped by them or required to do them. I love doing them. But I also want to do some of them are newer recordings. Like I did a song, it's a tribute to George Harrison when he died. It's called Pisces Brothers. And we just did his song, Here Comes the Sun, on 12 Sides of Summer.
Here Comes the Sun. I see it right now, the words, and on 12 Sides of Summer.
That's right.
By Mike Love, just came out. What you released this on a CD. What's do you hope that people aren't going to buy the CD anymore?
No, they will. They will. A lot of people.
Nobody has a CD player.
No, because this is tangibility and it's visually beautiful. So, I mean, that's hard to get on a cell phone,
That's true.
Yeah.
So, well, Mike Love, I want to thank you for myself for almost 60 years of amazing music. I listen to the music all the time, all
thank
the
you.
songs.
Thank you.
Everything. I'm sure everyone here agrees.
This audience rocks.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for joining the
thank you.
podcast. I really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it, and thank you again.
You're more than welcome, and I hope we can do it again sometime. It was really amazing. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So also, you can get a free digital download of 12 Sides of Summer, and you go to mikelove2.bandcamp. Oh, get them right here.
Okay. Yeah,
This is even a better place to get
If you
them.
want an album, pick it up. You get a digital download. But don't forget to order the CD from Amazon so you can give it out to 10 of your best friends.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.